Hello and welcome. So I've had this old Google server case sitting around for a few years now, and I finally decided I wanted to try and put something inside it. And since it's a little bit of a strange case, I want to put something a little more unique inside. So I do quite a bit of browsing on AliExpress, and I've been interested in these custom motherboards from some of the sellers on there. And here's what I ended up getting. The DIY gaming computer motherboard QXZS i7 1280p ES. Rolls right off the tongue. So basically, this is an engineering sample of a laptop CPU soldered onto a custom desktop motherboard with a big slab of metal on top to make it the proper height for coolers. You can get these with all sorts of different CPUs, both AMD and Intel. The one I have here is an i7 1280p, as you probably guessed from the product name. This could be a pretty good value, assuming they work correctly. It'd be difficult finding something comparable, performance-wise, for a similar price, new or used. The i7 1280p on here has 6 P cores and 8 E cores, making 20 total threads, and boosts up to 4.7 GHz. The RAM I got is also from AliExpress, if you couldn't tell from the brand name. Nvinda? Whatever, as long as it works. I also picked up an FSP Flex ATX PSU on eBay. It's a little noisy, but it'll be living in my basement, so I wasn't too concerned about that. Putting everything together for a test, and it actually boots up and goes into the BIOS, so that's a good start. I ran some benchmarks and was able to get it around 5800X levels of performance in Cinebench after changing some BIOS settings. Specifically, the C states needed turned on. After that, it started boosting properly. Finally, for cooling, I felt like I had to get another weird component, and that'll be this Dynatron 1U AIO liquid cooler. After I unboxed and tested everything, is when the real fun began. I tried to pop in the I/O shield, and surprise, that's not going to work. Turns out the 1U form factor is so small that it actually requires smaller I/O shields, and the motherboard I/O has to be under a certain height as well. Which leads me to the next issue. The motherboard I/O is not under that height limit. I could jam it in there, but then the other half of the motherboard would kind of be sticking up at a weird angle. I probably could have just went with it and screwed it all down, but then the whole board would have been under pressure and probably would have ended up having issues later on. That wouldn't matter anyway, because the Dynatron cooler mounting bracket also just doesn't work on this board. Both the front and back of the mounting hardware collide with something on the motherboard. Now maybe it's the weird AliExpress motherboard that's not quite to spec, but this Dynatron cooler also has mounting for the oldest Intel sockets, so I wouldn't rule out that it also being partially their fault. I experimented with modifying the brackets to fit, and I kind of got that working, but with the backplate on the motherboard, it was now slightly taller, making the I/O completely miss the rear cutout, and also the RAM would now scrape the top of the case when I put it on. So there was no way I was going to be able to get this cooler mounted. Oh, also, and to top it all off, this case doesn't use a Flex ATX PSU. I don't know what it wants. I stopped caring at this point, gave up on trying to make it work. So back to the parts pile the Google server case goes. And I also returned the Dynatron cooler because I have no idea what else I'd ever do with this if it wasn't going in this case. I don't want to return this motherboard or PSU though, because I do want to use these parts. So now I'll need something that'll fit this MATX-ish motherboard and PSU. And behold, after some Amazoning, I have found my solution. The A10 by TF Skywindental. I have no idea if this is the actual company that made this case or if it's just some open source design. There's several of these on Amazon, all from different sellers, but this fits the requirements perfectly, so I'm happy it exists. I'm still trying to get as many weird parts as I can, so I bought another weirdish cooler. This is the Thermalraid AXP90-53 Full Copper Edition. I've always thought these full copper coolers were really cool, but I've never had much of a reason to get one. It seemed like a great opportunity to try one out. Very shiny. Ooh. The build quality on this case is okay. Definitely not the best feeling thing I've ever used, but for the price I'd say it's more than acceptable. It has pretty decent hardware support. There's room for a few drives up top, or you have 3 half-height slots for something like a low-profile GPU. I could see this being a pretty good little HTPC or portable gaming computer. Maybe just invest in a better and quieter PSU for that. Putting everything together in this case was pretty easy since there's nothing really blocking anything from going in. If this board were a true MATX form factor, then I could see the front I/O being a little irritating with getting everything connected. But this is more of a DTX size board. It's about the width of an ITX and the length of an MATX. The storage is a 512GB 2230 NVMe drive that I previously used in my Steam Deck. Unfortunately, this motherboard doesn't have mounting for 2230, so I'll have to get a bit creative. Nothing 50 cents of PCB extensions and tape can't fix. Perfect. The CPU power was a bit irritating to route though. I think the PSU expects it to be mounted above the board, so it just barely reaches around the cooler without having to go over any slots. Other than that, I think this all came together pretty well. I ignored the whole fiasco with the Google server case, just had to iron out the entire original idea and completely changing everything to make it work. No big deal. Also, I want to make sure this computer is one of a kind, so I also ordered some cat meme stickers, of course. I think this big boy will fit appropriately. So my intention with this computer is to use it as my dedicated game server. Right now I'm hosting all my servers on my Unraid machine, and that works okay, but sometimes the more intensive ones can pin the CPU at 100% on all cores, which start to affect everything else running on the server, and that's not ideal. So to avoid all those issues, I'll be moving my Docker containers onto this guy. I've installed Proxmox as the base OS and spun up an Ubuntu server VM for running Docker. And now that I've got Portainer installed and running, I spent an unbelievable amount of time trying to transfer the Minecraft world from the Unraid server onto this one. Turns out remoting into the file system of a container running in a VM on one computer and then copying a Minecraft world from another container on a different computer from a third computer over the network isn't as simple as it sounds. Or maybe that's just a stupid idea. Anyway, after a ridiculous amount of time of remote consoles and scripts, I eventually got it running on the new computer. If you're thinking about doing anything that sounds remotely similar to this, I'd recommend just not. With everything up and running, I got in the Minecraft server and tested it out. The shark slows significantly faster and it takes a lot more time to get it to crash now. We're running a mod pack called All the Mods 10, so as you can imagine there's quite a few mods. I don't know if it's possible to get this server running to the point where it wouldn't crash anymore. I think that might just be more of a limitation of the Minecraft mod pack than the hardware at this point. But either way, I'm satisfied with how this is working. And here's a baby game server next to the big Unraid server. It's been a few weeks since I deployed it and it's been running without a single hiccup ever since. Honestly, I'm actually pretty surprised how well it's been running. With the AliExpress motherboard and RAM combo, I thought I might get some crashes or weird problems, but this has been great. I'm still a bit uneasy about recommending computer hardware from AliExpress, as I feel it's more of a gamble whether or not you actually get functional hardware, or like the slightly faulty reject pieces. But if you're interested in something like this and willing to take a bit of a risk on some AliExpress hardware, then I think this might be something to consider. That's about all I have on this computer, so I hope you enjoyed and thanks for watching.